Today I want to talk to you about ice and the two most common styles of ice that I use when I'm making cocktails here. The light bulb moment to those that make really good cocktails, or just maybe good cocktails in general, comes when you first figure out the importance of ice. Now, not all ice is created equally, and today I'm going to talk about two ice makers that I've been using, one recently and one for over a year, like a year and a half now. Now, one of these is a traditional ice maker that's great for shaking or stirring drinks and when you need just normal ice cubes. And then the Nugget Ice Maker I use for most of the cocktails that you're going to see here on this channel. Now, both of these ice makers were sent to me for free, but there's a little bit more to that story, which I'll get to about this machine. But I'm not getting paid to make this video. Vevor, the brand who sent these to me, does not get to review this video, and I will give you my 100% honest opinion. But with that being said, since these were both sent to me for free, I will not be offering an endorsement or recommending them, just giving you my opinions after the time I've spent using them. So let's start with the literal elephant in the room, this monstrosity of an ice maker. I did not realize this was going to be so big. And if you have limited space, this is not going to work for you. This makes really good ice and a lot of it, but the biggest downside to me is that, well, besides the space, is that it also needs a drain. So you need a floor drain, or you need to drain it outside, or you have to put it above a sink to drain it, and it's pretty big and heavy. The elements of this ice maker are not too different from what you're going to see from similar ones that you can buy online and smaller ones as well. What's nice about this one is you can adjust the thickness from pretty thin cubes to sheets of ice. Now, when I first ran this machine, they were coming out of sheets of ice. It was set too thick, and I didn't understand why someone would want that. But then I was thinking more about it. If you camp or travel and you use ice packs, you could just take these sheets of ice and put them in the bottom of a cooler, or you could put them in a Ziploc bag and have basically your own little ice pack. The biggest advantage to this exact one is that it makes a lot of ice fast and it holds a lot of ice. It's also well insulated to keep the ice colder longer. But almost all of these ice makers that you find online, and these two ones right in front of you, especially the budget-friendly options, they don't store ice. They don't have an onboard freezer. It's just the ice that it's making and the insulation that is keeping these things from melting. So you definitely want to be aware when you're buying any ice maker, if you're planning on just making ice and leaving it in the machine, does that ice maker actually keep that ice cold with some type of onboard compressor? And almost all of them that I've ever seen do not. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite, which is Nugget Ice. And I call it Nugget Ice and not anything else because that's what it's called. The company that created this is Scotsman back in like the 1970s, and they had a patent on it. But this style of ice is Nugget Ice. Now this machine was sent to me by Vevor over a year ago, like a year and a half ago. And around that time, I also got myself another Nugget Ice maker that was very similar to this one with the front door and the basket. So I knew I didn't need it, but they asked me if I wanted it. I told them I already had one, and they sent it to me anyways, and they never responded asking for a video or anything. So I'm about a year and a half later, about a year and a half of using this machine and another Nugget Ice machine. So I have a pretty good experience with this machine and this style of machine with the door in the front and the basket that slides out. So yes, I have two Nugget Ice makers. They're almost identical. And I have made hundreds of pounds of ice over the last year and a half of having these machines, and I've never had a single problem with this style of machine. Now, before I talk about the upsides to this Nugget Ice machine and this style, I do want to talk about some of the downsides to this machine and all Nugget Ice machines, including the fancy ones. And like we already mentioned, they don't hold ice. But I use these bags. These are just ice bags I buy on Amazon. I reuse them sometimes too. As I make ice, I put them in the bag and I store them in the freezer. So to reiterate for like the third time, these do not store ice. They make ice. The ice drops down into the basket, or if you have a machine that has, the scoop on the top, they just sit there, and it is the ice itself that creates the cold temperatures. Over time, that ice is going to melt, and it's just going to recirculate that water back to the top of the machine, make more ice, and drop it in. Now, some people like that. You can keep this on your counter and have ice all the time. I think it's a little bit wasteful. And also the temperature of that ice is going to be around freezing, like actually right at freezing, where my freezer has much colder temperatures. It's like 0 degrees Fahrenheit instead of 32. So I'm always storing the ice that I make. I never use ice directly from the machine. I always take it out and I store it in my freezer. Another issue I've had with this style of machine is that it sometimes doesn't turn off. It doesn't have any actual buttons, which is just kind of the way the world works nowadays. I guess it has buttons, but they're like touch sensitive and not switches or buttons that I can press. But after I'm done making ice, I'll often press the power button and then I'll leave. And the next morning I'll come by the machine and it's full of ice. This happens with both of the machines I have. So the only remedy for that, for someone who doesn't want to run it all the time, is to unplug it. Now that's only when there's water inside, and the way you fill these up with water is you just pour it right into the front of the machine. Something you can do, and I have done for my other machine, is I have it plumbed in. So I took an old refrigerator water line and I split it, and I have it coming to the machine. Now the downside I've also found with this style is that it seems like sometimes it just starts filling up with water as long as it's plugged in. And to avoid it filling with water, I've unplugged the machine because I don't want it sitting full of water when I'm not using it. And there's drains off the back that you pull. So what I did more recently was on the one that I have plumbed in to my refrigerator water line, I actually put in a little valve. So when I'm done using the machine, I actually shut off the water going to that ice maker. The other downside to consider when you are considering any ice maker that's going in your kitchen or pantry or wherever it is the size of it. This one's pretty deep. I'll put the dimensions up on the screen. And no matter what they look like, I don't think any of them are that attractive that I want sitting out on my bar or in my kitchen. So you need a place to put these, and they are not too heavy, but it's not something you want to move around every week as you're making more and more ice. So let's talk about the upsides for this machine. And the first is, I think they're pretty quiet. They have a fan on board, and otherwise the only real noise you're hearing is when you first start making ice. It's going to drop it into an empty basket, and you're going to hear the ice hitting the basket inside. Other than that, I find that they're relatively quiet. It's not something I'd want running 24/7, but if you had it on a kitchen counter, at least this style, it's quiet enough for me. Now, you do need to clean these things often. There's a cleaning program. You can also buy cleaning solutions. I have never experienced a problem with these machines getting dirty or moldy, but that's also because I don't have them sit with water indefinitely. When I'm done using them, I unplug the machine, I drain it, I leave the door open, I pull the basket out so it airs out. If you've been combing through online reviews of Nugget Ice Makers, you're gonna see good and bad reviews for so many of these. None of them seem to be rated very highly. I will tell you, this style, which I have 2 of these, I've not had any problems. They've always worked. I've never had an issue where it said to do something and put in more water or to clean it and it didn't work. So I just keep on top of it by cleaning it every couple uses, making sure it's drained and unplugged when I'm not using it. And so far, after a year and a half, I've had no issues. Now, the biggest positive and the biggest upside for me is that I no longer have to go out and buy Nugget Ice. And I was doing that for the first probably 6 months of me making videos here on YouTube. And then for the months and years before me making videos here, I don't have a Sonic anywhere near me, so I can't buy ice from Sonic. But Chick-fil-A does sell ice, and it's pretty cheap too. You get a bag of ice for just a couple dollars, and it's not too far from my house. It's like a 10-minute drive, but even that 10-minute drive is kind of a pain, and they always have long lines. It also made me conserve the ice a lot. I knew if I ran out of ice, I would have to go buy more. So I was a little stingy and conservative with the amount of ice I used. Now, with the fact that I can turn this machine on at any time and have ice ready to go in the matter of minutes, I'm not stingy with my Nugget Ice, and I use Nugget Ice every day. So sometimes for cocktails, sometimes it's for iced coffee. My wife likes to drink sparkling sodas with it. So we don't have to worry about wasting it. I don't care if some of it spills out into the ground or if I drop some in the sink, because I can always make more easily. So if you have options to a local restaurant that sells Nugget Ice, you might find that economically it doesn't make a lot of sense to have one of these machines, well, a Nugget Ice machine. But it does if you want some convenience. And I think for me, after all this time, a year and a half of using machine and not having issues with it, it is more than paid for itself had I bought it, which would have been think about $300 for this one, but you can find other similar nugget ice machine models that are less expensive if you're looking online. So there you go. These are the two machines that I am using right now to make ice in cocktails that you see here on YouTube. Sometimes if I'm making a daiquiri, I might sneak in some of my kitchen refrigerator ice cubes to shake. But generally, I'm using this machine for the stuff I'm shaking with, for stirred cocktails, for normal ice cubes. It's big. I don't know how many of you in a non-commercial setting would need this. If you have an outdoor bar or a garage or somewhere with a drain nearby, or you can drain it outside. This, I think it has a lot of value for the money because it makes so much more ice and can hold more ice than other machines that are just, $50 to $100 less. But that's up to you. And then if you're looking for a nugget ice maker, I really would just go on Amazon and look for the reviews and make sure that you understand what you're getting. Make sure you double check that return policy and that you kind of trust that if something goes wrong with it, you'll be taken care of. I will include links to these machines and the other one I've used in this episode's description. They will be affiliate links, most likely, so I could earn a commission and you'd be supporting this channel if you clicked on it and bought it through that link. But like I said, I encourage you to do your own research when you're putting yourself out there to get a big investment like one of these ice makers that you're not that sure about. But in my opinion, the ones I've used so far, I have had no issues with. Outside of, the occasional information booklet, which is kind of difficult to understand, they've all worked. I like the ice that this makes, like the actual size, the actual texture of the ice. I've seen some cheaper ones on like TikTok. They don't even look like nugget ice to me. So make sure that you can see in pictures from people or the machine that it actually is nugget ice and not some knockoff nugget ice. So that's it for this one. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like below. Consider subscribing if you want to support this channel more. Check out my Patreon page. Otherwise, see you on the next one.